Hey, badasses. Thanks for tuning in. Today's episode is going to be a bit different. Stevie's on the road, so it's me, Kelly Young. And this will be a different format and a different topic. And I'm not quite sure it's going to be even edited. So this is going to be a raw conversation. But today we're diving into an open, honest, and transparent conversation with two incredible guests and friends of mine, Angie Carr-Klitsch.
Yes. Kelly. Thanks for having me and pronouncing my last name correctly.
Well, you know I practiced. I was practicing. Angie is the CEO of Women for Change, and Denise Hurd, founder and president of Hurd Strategies, member of Alpha sorority, and a dear friend who challenges me and supports me every day. These two badass women are here to tackle some hard but necessary truths about where we stand as women. White women, black women, women in the LGBTQ plus community, immigrant women, just women, and what it means to move forward together following the election results. I'm not leaving out men, but for this purpose, we're focusing on women. We know the history. Black women often don't trust white women. Denise and I had that conversation earlier. Yes.
We did.
So very open and honest about that, and for very good reason. So when I asked Denise about this podcast, I was asking, what can we do? So what can we do to bridge that divide? What can we do to have that conversation? Are we having that conversation? When's the right time to have that conversation? When I wanted to talk to Angie, it was also about what are we doing as women and Women for Change, the organization and the work that you're doing as well too. So questions like what can we do to bridge the divide if we can? And as a community, how do we come together to say, and I love this, I actually heard this on another podcast, we didn't consent to this chaos. It is freaking chaos. We can't spend the next 4 years just yelling into the void. So what steps can we take to heal, rebuild, connect, and create change? This is a raw, real conversation, a very necessary conversation with Denise and Angie, and I appreciate both of them and their willingness to join me. I'm so thrilled to have them and have their voices leading us forward. We're actually recording this at Hurd Strategies, downtown Indianapolis. So,
thanks, Denise.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Beautiful space.
So,
Thank you.
and with my equipment, as I was trying to put it together all by myself.
You did good. You did great.
Thanks.
You did great.
Thanks. So bear with us with this conversation and any kind of technical issues we may or may not have, any background noises and or technology issues. But here we go. This is a conversation. So let's get into it. First, I want to give you both an opportunity and just ask the question, how are you? I know that's a hard question, but how are you? And I don't know who wants to go first.
I think the answer is, how are you today?
How are you today? Good question.
Because it feels like a grieving process, and to some extent, how I show up in the day is dependent on where I am and kind of the acceptance and moving forward. Today, I'm feeling a little bit vulnerable. I think when the weather's not great outside, it matched my mood, whereas today, I need to turn a curve, turn a point, and find joy again and get to work. But we're not going to feel ready to do that every single day. And I think honoring that is part of this conversation and part of having real conversations about where we stand and what's the road ahead look like for all of us as individuals, but for us as a community to come together.
Yeah, that's great.
That's a really great question. And I don't know how I feel, because what we're living through now is something that I know I've not ever experienced before. So it's hard for me to compartmentalize it, if you will, and say, this is how I feel, because I don't know what I'm witnessing. We lived through something years ago that was unprecedented. And then I think that we as a community thought we had moved beyond that. And so now that we have not, if you will, to some of us, we feel as though we have not, because there are some people that say oh, this is great. Now that we have not, we are entering unprecedented times, unknown times, where we're watching decisions that are being made and kind of saying, okay, what does that mean for us? So I'm not sure how I feel, because everything is so unknown, so precarious. So you don't know who to trust. You don't know who did what. I don't know how I feel, because I've never felt like this before.
That's fair. And I think we don't know how we will feel. Mm-hmm. I think, as I said before, we can't spend the next 4 years just yelling into the void, but I'm not sure we know what to do, how to do it. I think, Denise, when you and I first talked about doing this interview, you said, I want to be honest, which you always are with me. But you had said something to me and said that, it's going to be hard, but this is the direction I'm going to go. We don't trust white women. And I don't know if you want to elaborate on that. I mean,
yeah, I'm happy to. So, but let me say that the trust, it didn't just happen.
Right.
It's been cultivated over decade and decade and decades and decades of situations, in preparing for today's conversation. I started doing just a little bit of research because, the trust didn't just happen overnight. There have been situations that have occurred. And so, I looked at this through an education lens. And I did some research about Jane Crow and how white women have constantly through time oppressed Black children in our education, with education and with our school systems. I looked at it through the lens of economics, going back to the 1960s when minimum wage was $1.25 an hour, yet 90% of Black women in the South worked as domestics, where they were paid $3.50 to $5 a day and worked on average 12 to 14 hours in a white woman's home. So that was time when she was away from her own children. She spent more time raising the children of this white woman who paid her basically 25 cents to 35 cents an hour. She spent more time raising her children than her own children. I looked at it through a political lens as well when during the suffragist movement, with Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, when they would not let Black women march shoulder to shoulder with them, demanding that all women have the right to vote. And even when Elizabeth Cady Stanton gave a speech that talked about the peril that would come to white women if the so-called Negro male was given the right to vote before the white woman. The fact that it's 2024, we've never had a Black governor here in the state of Indiana. And the closest that we got to that was, 2 years ago down in Georgia. And we could not get her across the finish line. So this issue of not trusting white women wasn't born overnight. It goes way, way, way back. And it's so deeply rooted that I think maybe in some instances we're not asking the right questions and we're not having the right conversations about this mistrust.
And I appreciate you bringing all of that to the attention too as well. And I know when you and I talked last week, it was let's bring these hard conversations. Let's bring these facts. And it's not a quick fix. This is not a one-time conversation. No. And white men saying we want to help. It's not fair. Or we're here for you. Are we? Because we weren't. 50. I think it was 52% of white women voted for Trump. And, we've even talked about our own communities and where people have landed. So, go ahead,
Denise,
Angie.
I appreciate the background because I do think that it's very important to note that this has been, the foundations of our country, that there hasn't been alignment in that capacity. Just the other evening, the night before the election, Ruby Bridges was in town as part of the Women's Fund for Central Indiana. And she spoke to, who was outside of the school, who was yelling at that small child, just trying to get an education. It was white women because the men were at work too. Look at the pictures. And that is a stark reality that we have to face, that for decades, centuries, that as white women, we have maybe aligned with hierarchies of power to protect ourselves. The numbers speak for itself, to your point, Kelly, about the outcomes at the election, and that 92% of Black women voted for Kamala Harris, and that was not nearly the percentage we saw with white women. So we have, work to do to build trust, but it starts with listening. It's not us telling what needs to be done, but it's work within our own communities too, right? I feel like we ask Black women to solve a lot of problems.
Denise is like, I'm tired of being the one Black person that my friends call.
Right. And this is our responsibility to address what's within our own race of white women, about how we are forsaking our daughter's future. We are not fighting for equality or equity. That you need to be intersectional in your feminism.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I guess the question, and I don't know that we have the answer, and again, we can't solve it today, but knowing the deep history of that, and here it is, 2024, 2025, and we're still asking these questions. I mean, are there ways to break these barriers and start that trust, And I don't know if that's the right question, but you see, how do we begin breaking down those barriers that have built over decades and decades and go beyond us?
I think it's looking at how I think Black women and white women view community differently and view our responsibility and what we need to do as women through very different lenses. It seems to me that white women are more focused in being at parity with their husbands or their brothers. They want to be in line with what they are leading their households in doing, whereas Black women look at what can we do to empower an entire community? What can we do to handle the terrors that are going to be inflicted upon our Black children, our Black men? Like, we look at it at a very, very community-centric through a very community-centric focus, not as like I'm trying to be equal to my white spouse or the white community. We're looking at like, how do we elevate, how do we empower, how do we protect? And I think that because we look at community or look at our role as women in our communities through different lenses, trust is just one factor that is kind of where we're focusing, because I think trust is easy. Like, we can look, okay, what are the trust issues? Mm-hmm. But what we need to look at are what are the values that we have as women, as Black women and white women? What are the priorities that we have as Black women and as white women? As a white woman, are you fearful if your son gets pulled over by the police? As a Black woman, we're petrified. Right. We tell our black young men, you have one job, and that is to come back to this house. Like, when you leave out of here, the only thing I need you to do is get back here in one piece. I remember having conversations with my nephews, telling them, you are minor children. If anything happens to you, you don't do anything until your mother, your father, or I get there. Don't do anything, because the odds of you getting into a situation that we may have to fight to get you out of are much stronger because of who you are. So I think that because we have different life experiences and look at our roles as women in protecting our communities differently, trust is just one factor of many that are out there, but we just have different life experiences that factor into that.
I like your theory on the community, because I do think that if you look at just some societal indicators, like with the voucher movement, if you look at kind of the super zip codes and this selection, the idea of community has narrowed. And thinking about our children, it is a smaller subset, and it's children that look like your children versus this idea of your Black babies are my babies too. We need to be protecting them. We need to understand, even if I'm not personally affected by that, I need to understand the lived experience of a mother who worries about her son coming home at night because he's a young Black man. Yeah. And some of those conversations really, I feel like, even for me, as someone who hopefully engages in those, in that real dialogue, happened after the murder of George Floyd. Really picking up the phone and talking with, friends, again, where there's trust, and I can and say, what can I do? I'm worried about this. it's not your responsibility to make me feel better. I know I have a role to play, and I just want to be here for you, and I'm going to figure out what I need to do within my space, to affect change and to try to, increase education and empathy. Somehow that's been lost, that we don't think that the community's welfare is directly tied to our own personal wellness too.
Yeah, that's true.
It's interesting though, because we live George Floyd every day. And then, and so it took George Floyd for white people to say like, ooh, we have a problem, but we've been saying there's a problem for decades. And so I think that's also where the trust, or just the whole, we look at things differently, because we look at George Floyd, and I see my nephews, like I see my nephews in George Floyd. Trayvon Martin, those are my nephews. I mean, those, and that's every day for us. But it took George Floyd for now everyone to start picking up the phone saying, hey, can we talk? And it's like,
where were you before?
Yeah, like, no, we can't talk because we've been trying to talk to you forever. Now, suddenly, because it's on your TV screen, it's a big issue now. Whereas before, it's always been an issue, and we've been saying this has been an issue,
Yes.
but our voices have fallen on deaf ears. So, I mean, we can't unring the bell. I get that. We can't go back and rewrite history, but I think that we all need to understand where we're all coming from when we're trying to have these conversations, and realize maybe we can't start with trust without doing some acknowledgement of some things in the past, and then showing how we've moved beyond that. And if you look at data, it will tell you we haven't moved beyond that. So now you're asking me to trust you
Again.
right? You're asking me to trust you again. But when I look at the current data and what it's telling me about outcomes for Black communities and Black children, it doesn't ring trust. Does that make sense?
Yeah, not centering that priority.
Right. Right.
I agree. I mean, again, I think that if you have been aware of the data, if you have been in these conversations, recognizing that, there are disproportionate outcomes with respect to your race, and, particularly for Black women too, if we talk about the maternal outcomes for them. So we need to lift that up. That needs to be a high priority for all of us, and to recognize that, repair that, and that takes time. That's not going to happen overnight. And it's not with like public displays of a blue bracelet.
Right. Right.
I do want to figure out how I can communicate that I'm a safe space, because, there is not always that trust. I have my personal friends and relationships, obviously, but, all I can do is be aware and active and step in, because I have, the opportunity to walk through institutions of power. I'm a cis white woman, right? You know what I mean? So it's my responsibility, I think, in many instances, to speak truth in those spaces, and to come back and to try to understand more fully how we can move beyond social bonding and try to bridge between and find the commonalities, Denise, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and I keep saying the word bridge, like bridging those divides and bridging the gap and bridging. It's like, what's that other step? What's the action? I think I shared with you guys that, the action over outrage.
I think that you all as white women need to have a conversation with yourselves.
Yeah.
About where do you stand where this issue is concerned? Because we as Black women have these conversations with each other all the time. Like, we know what we're supposed to do. Like, I know what my marching orders are. I know, after the election, there were many gatherings, there were many conversations with Black women where we were kind of given our priorities, what we needed to do to make sure that we did not lose momentum after the election, and that, we needed to prioritize making sure that, I'm not against you as a white person, but I'm pro me.
Sure,
You know, I'm
yeah.
pro me, but I'm not against you, but I'm pro me. So, you know, like really encouraging us that now more than ever, we need to support Black businesses. Now more than ever, we need to address matters involving Black women and healthcare and access to healthcare and maternal health. Our priorities with respect to looking at the political environment, you know, just there are very specific kind of like some guidance that we've been given to make sure that we are uplifting our communities and supporting our communities. And we had those conversations with each other, you know, in very safe places to make sure, yes, these are priorities for us. I think it would be very interesting because after the election, you know, as a Black person, you could go through your social media and see how your so-called white friends voted. You could tell, you know, there were some clear posts that were out there and then some that gave away just enough for you to say, oh yeah, you're getting blocked. I mean, like,
Yeah.
you're about to start laughing.
Right. And you and I talked about that,
Yes, we
even
did.
Denise too. It was
Yeah.
like some of us just needed that time to like settle and simmer before talking out loud too much. Maybe that's the wrong approach to take. Maybe not. I know for me, it was a time where, I mean, I think I shared with you that my daughter, who is in the LGBTQ community, called me the day after in tears, and I dropped everything and drove up to Purdue to
for
be
you.
with her,
Good
right?
for you.
Because I don't know where everybody is, but I know where I am. I think that's great to challenge us to have these conversations. I wonder who's leading that. And I don't know, Angie, if you have some thoughts on that, and especially with the work that you're doing and serving as a role, very important role too. I'm sure you got calls and questions and give you this space to
We
talk.
definitely have. We've been trying to respond to our form submissions, just open online. Lots of concerns, as you can well imagine, from lots of different groups of individuals beyond just women's issues, right? So trying to coordinate behind the scenes with like-minded groups. But I think recognizing also in this moment that not that it's fatigue, but there is a real fear. And I'm not saying that again for myself as someone who can kind of navigate spaces, but you know, the idea of coming together, trusting that your security would be in place, particularly as we are strawmanning up several worst case scenarios, frankly, behind the scenes, whether that be with mass deportation happening almost immediately in this administration. So we're taking that into consideration. It's very fluid, is what I would say. I know that we are committed at Women for Change to do the listening that needs to happen, to recognize that we were founded in 2016 after that election, and obviously we find ourselves in deja vu, right? Back at a place in time where we need to regroup and rebuild, and we need to take into consideration these election outcomes and the realities of the historical movement of women's rights. Hopefully, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, the long arc of the universe bends towards moral justice. I hope. But we are talking with stakeholders and alliance organizations about coming together, having much more inclusivity and exhaustive listening so that we can compile really a plan that includes policy agenda for the next decade, because that is what really we are facing at this moment in time, is a long haul. What are the incremental tasks? Where can people get behind? Where can we find commonality? But it is definitely going to be something that we hope to meet the moment, and look forward to continued form submissions and people just reaching out to come up with ideas. You know, our organization is an advocacy group. And we will be at the State House monitoring what's happening in this session. But we're an organization of advocates. That's where the power has been. How do we empower small groups where there is trust already built, whether they're book clubs, all of the different sororities that came out to really get out the vote? How do we supply them with what they need to be able to activate in their own spaces? To me, that's the strategy forward. And as we build that, then we can start bridging back together and see real action, right? I think community wants to see real action about white women owning our role and where we are today in inculcating the patriarchy.
Yeah. I mean, as a white woman, I can say, and on the podcast, that I'm pissed, right? Like, I'm pissed. And like I said, I know having separate conversations with the two of you before coming into this podcast, I knew where each of us were coming from. And it's time, like, it pisses me off that we're in this space right now. And that, I feel like I'm apologizing for my white friends and white women, where I'm like, what does it take? Like, what does it take?
I think that question needs to be asked of a white woman that voted for him. And so, when you have this conversation, because you've got this platform, invite some individuals that voted the way that they voted and get their perspective, and then invite the two differing viewpoints together to have a conversation. That's where the real dialogue takes place. Right now we're all kind of singing from the same sheet music, though it may have been a different composer. We are singing from the same sheet music, but it'd be wonderful to bring someone in that is singing from a piece of sheet music made in a different genre of music, and to see, because harmonious discord is how we move together as a population. Like, we can't be one note. We just can't. And so we do need that. But let's figure out how we can coexist also, instead of immediately going into our respective corners and saying, I don't trust you.
Right.
Because we do need to come together, because the issues that we're facing as women impact all of us. And so, we may have differing viewpoints. Think about George W. is the second, and Michelle Obama. They're like buddies.
Yeah.
They have very differing viewpoints, but they have an endearing friendship that has stood the test of time. And so we do have to coexist. We do want to raise our families. We do want what's best for our children. We do want what's best. We just have different viewpoints on the pathways of achieving those goals. But let's come together, because I don't understand your pathway and you don't understand mine. So how can we create at least an understanding? I may not agree, I may not even respect it, but at least I've heard it. Mm-hmm. And I've heard it from someone that I know, and we've talked about it. So I would encourage you to push even further in this conversation.
And I'm going to push you to join me. Oh. Yeah. So if you don't know, Denise has her podcast as well too.
Yeah.
Have you heard?
I love it.
Thank you.
So, as my friend, as my life advisor, as somebody who has a very important voice. We're doing this in person, so I just saw you roll your eyes.
So, I get it. Yeah, I know. Either you're going to talk about it or be about it. Otherwise, you're a bobblehead. So
That's right. That's right. And neither one of us wants that.
We're not bobbleheads.
We're not bobbleheads. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, boy. That may have to have... Now, that may need alcohol.
I'm okay with that. I like red. Or actually, we might need something stronger.
Yeah, probably.
So I guess for both of you, talk about that community of care. How can we, here right now in this time that we're in, how can we create stronger, more intentional communities of care that go beyond just words and saying like, I want you to trust me. I trust, or I understand. I don't understand. How can we truly support those most affected by the current political climate and support each other?
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness!
Angie just gave Denise the.
I know.
You go first.
Angie, that's a really good question, because I think we're all kind of trying to find our ways through this. You mentioned at the beginning that I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha, and I love my sorority. I've been a member for 36 years, so long time, and we're about merit in culture and service to all mankind. That is really what guides us. We often say our sisterhood is our superpower. That's what really makes us shine. And I will tell you, the Monday after the election, we had a gathering here in the city, and it was not a formal thing. It was just come if you're available, couple of hours. We had some food. food, we had some cocktails, and we just passed the mic and talked about how we were feeling, what our priorities needed to be. And I will tell you, that was so therapeutic for all of us. You know, many of us didn't say anything. We just listened and nodded in agreement and clapped and said, "Yeah, I know that's right, girl." You know, we did all of that. And then after that, we did a prayer call where we could all call in and we just prayed. And, you know, and there were a lot of tears and a lot of just empowering words and scripture that was shared. And I think creating places for women to come together and talk to one another, I think that's a great way to focus on care. I mean, it can be just impromptu spaces. Like the night we were all at Ruby Bridges, that was a great place.
amazing.
It was amazing. You know, all the great tabletop conversations. I think that we as women need to get out more. You know, the winter is coming, so we'll become hermits. But I think getting out and because when you're out, you're talking to people. You know, and it can be a look and a girl I know, you know, just something that we just can find ways to connect with one another. We were at an event this past weekend and sponsored a table and had some women at the table. And every lady that left said, "Thank you so much for inviting me. I just absolutely love this." And it was a gala that was hosted by a bunch of guys, but we invited some women to be at our table
together.
We had fun. Yeah. And we had fun. And so that was, you know, it was a break. It was lighthearted. Everyone looked beautiful. And then we went home, you know. So I think we as women need to find more times to get out and be with one another, not mired in this, but just enjoying one another's company.
Together, socializing,
Yeah.
you know, hearing each other, right?
Yeah.
To be seen and heard is a gift, especially from our sisters. You know, I come from a house that's all boys.
Oh, I'm
sorry. I know. So like Denise, the, you know, idea of a community of care, I have what I call my tribe, and we came together after the 2016 election, and you know, the same group for tears and conversation, and you know, and to just try to fill each other's tanks for again the long journey ahead. So starting at that like smaller nuclear level, taking care of yourself and those immediately around you will go far, and then the community. I can't get more behind that of like, you know, we need the social interaction. We are social creatures. I have a theory that during COVID, particularly women, we had no bandwidth. You know, if you're a working mom, your kids weren't at school, there just wasn't a lot of energy or time to be able to go out. You couldn't in many instances during those first years of COVID. But to activate, and you know, and in that vacuum, what has come are, you know, an ideology and a way of viewing the world that is really not treating women as an equal citizen and human and able to have agency over their future and decision making. We need to claim that back.
Yes. Remember during COVID, that one, when they gave the jobs report, that one quarter, it was like 200,000 jobs were lost, and they were all lost by women.
Denise, you are speaking my language.
I knew this. I knew the two of you.
As the former president and CEO of Employee Indy, those first 3 months after COVID hit, 90% of the dislocation around the country was women exiting the workforce. Within 2 weeks. 3 months, 3 months. We've lost 50 years of economic empowerment
For women.
for women.
For women.
For women. And
It's
you know,
not okay.
I love your history ad. What I want to also say too about history is that we talk about, America, what they're trying to go back to, right? This and all, you know, our prosperity and economic vitality that happened post World War II. Yes, some of that is GI Bill, and some of that is, you know what it is? It's that 50% of the labor force started participating because until the war, women were at home, and then they entered the workforce. So most of America's economic growth and, you know, leadership is predicated on women's contributions to the economy. And I have some data too about, we have 2/3 of, by 2028, women will have 2/3 of all discretionary spending. So economic empowerment is a key for us to then make decisions around our own future.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm such a, like I'm ready to like find out where can we find these resources, right? Like, and I know we've kind of laughed about it. I came to the two of you for this conversation for specific reasons. We don't know where they are, right? Like, I love that your sorority got together. Where are these other conversations happening, and how do we make sure that we're invited? And this is a selfish plug for myself. Like, how do I want to be at your table.
I think that sometimes we have to create the table also.
Great
I think
point.
that we have to
Yes.
be, it's like, I think that we have reached a time where you can't wait anymore. Like, oh, I wish I had known. No, create your own. Be intentional. And because that was the next thing I was going to say is when you're talking about, well, how do we find places that we can heal and blah, blah, blah. Well, you have to create, like, what are you going to do in this narrative? Like you see there's a problem, there's an issue. So what are you going to do in order to do your part? And so like you've got this platform. And so you say, you know what, I'm going to use my platform. I'm going to bring some women together. I'm going to have these conversations. Maybe for the next several months, that is what you dedicate this platform to, is having these conversations that are long overdue in our community. And you have them with young women, you have them with trans women, you have them with women from our queer community, our LGBTQIA plus community. You have them with very diverse communities of women, because there is a through line to all of this, because we're all women.
Right.
We're just approaching things a little bit differently, but let's hear from voices in through your platform and what your platform is about. And I just think that more of us need to use that and do that. Think about your social media content, your personal social media page. Like, I put up a post today because the president-elect has created his cabinet, and he was very intentional about pursuing Black men to support him, and utilized Black men and had rallies for Black men, but did not appoint one Black man or woman for that fact to be a part of his administration. So what does that tell you? So these are the types of things that we as women need to call out and point out to one another. And that's how we, kind of self-heal and keep the conversation going and educate one another about, what is going on, because there's too much.
Right.
So we all have to pick, like, what is our platform? What is our voice? What are we going to do? And we need to push that forward. And the other thing I'll add is, and not be afraid.
Yes.
Because a lot of times I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to lose my client. I don't want to lose my friends. You know what? That day is over. Like, we need to speak up, because being quiet it's not moving us forward.
Yeah, use your voice. I love that.
Yeah.
And when I called you and we talked about I was like, should I use this? Badassery Life has
And I
always
told
been
you.
about celebrating women and ordinary women doing extraordinary things. Maybe there is this opportunity to use this platform to say, how can we move forward? How can we leverage this time to make change? And like I said, I'm tired. Like, we're tired. We're tired.
Well,
and not just me. I know we're all tired. We're all tired.
Well, we're going to take this podcast and we're going to put it on How They See Us, because how they see us, we have conversations with people where they talk about how they're seen in the world in which they live and operate. Well, here is a conversation about how we're seen as white women, as Black women, and seen and unseen. And missing. So we plan to share this on our platform too. So, we would like to stand shoulder to shoulder with you in this conversation and in this journey, because it's just so important.
It is.
So important.
It is.
I second Denise's idea about utilization of the platform.
For sure.
So we can take on those learnings too. I think these conversations are way overdue, to your point. And hopefully you can inspire people to have these conversations around their dining room table, right? And can we figure out a way to kind of help facilitate that, right? In those spaces. I think that is a necessary first step oftentimes before we can really start to come back out energized, feeling supported and enthused, and having, you know what I mean, a group, it takes two, it takes three, you just grow it, right? And we can all create those tables for ourselves versus waiting to be invited. So many of that is happening in an informal setting, right?
Right.
Through social media platforms, through different affinity groups. These are not formalized institutions. These are women looking for community, looking for connection, right? And whether that's trying to come together around a geography or around a certain priority, we need to be very thoughtful about helping them self-organize versus necessarily trying to do everything top down in the hierarchical way that our society has operated, right? So
Yeah.
it's the age of Aquarius today. So
Yes.
it is.
Yes.
Well, and one thing is always important about women and self-care and our, making sure people are talking about, like, I'm not a joy. Like, I don't know where I'm at right now. We started that, the top of this podcast. I don't know where I'm at right now, but I think it is important to protect our joy. And I wrote and have this thought too, like that, this chaos doesn't get to steal our happiness. I think it's important for us to hold on to what matters and don't let this shit show. I think I said circus in my notes, but this is really a shit show take over. And really at the end of the day, this system doesn't deserve that from me. Like it doesn't deserve that much of me. Like, I want to do something. And so I'm so thrilled that you guys joined me today on this conversation. But I guess I just want to have you each have like another opportunity. Like, what would you like to say? Here's this, and we can continue and we'll continue this conversation. So I purposely did not put a time frame to this, even though most of my listeners know I usually am pretty good about the 30 minutes, but this is an ongoing conversation. I haven't even looked at the clock, so I don't know where we are on the time. But I want you each to have an opportunity to say something that maybe just, I know this has been a raw conversation, but where is your heart? What do you want to say right now?
She's not editing, and there's a whole big pregnant pause in the middle.
Taking a deep breath.
I know. And don't be scared, right? We just said that, didn't he? Said don't,
That's a tough one.
It is. And maybe we need to quiet our hearts. I think you and I talked about that too. Like, what is this energy that we're feeling? And I don't know.
What was the question again?
I'm pretty sure I was just giving you a last minute.
Oh, there wasn't a question.
It's an open-ended question.
Yeah.
A challenge.
So you're asking for like just some thoughts. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah.
I don't.
And I'm not going to say the ending thoughts because this conversation needs to be, continuing. But
I just think that until you all figure out what it is you want to do as white women, let us know. Yeah. Because we're just going to keep marching forward because that's what we do. That's what we've just been brought up to do. It's what my grandmother taught my mother taught me, my sister. I mean, we just know what we need to do, what our role is, what our responsibility is. We're not trying to apologize for 400 years of bad behavior. We're not, because we don't have anything to apologize for. And so, figure it out. And when you figure it out, let us know. And then maybe we can have a conversation about coming together and moving forward. But until then, we'll just keep going in this direction because we can't become stagnant. And I see that there's change that wants to happen, but there is some unfinished business that 100%. You all have as white women that you probably need to have with each other, because as Black women, we're pretty united. Now, we may not always agree, but we kind of know what our role is and what we're supposed to do because we've been trained, we've been scared, we have fought, we have marched, we've been harassed, we've done it all. So I think that's where I kind of am right now. I'm just waiting for you all to figure out how you want to interact with us, how you all want to interact with each other, and what is the goal.
Yeah, that's great. Angie. Thank you, Denise.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Denise. I feel rather disappointed in this moment with white women, if
Right.
I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Now, over the course of the last few months in particular, because of Women for Change, working with organizations around getting out the vote, we've been surrounded with like-minded partners, people activating their home and spaces, writing 27,000 postcards. And there's just a lot of sadness, I think, in this moment, and questioning what else needs to be done. Who is serving up our children's futures, our daughters' futures, for alignment with power? What is making these decisions, whether it's for candidates or for different policies? Where are you coming from that you maybe have a perception where you've bought into a social construct that women are helpmates, women are not supposed to have their own ambitions, dreams, or goals, that their purpose is really to just support the man. And that singular identity is something we have fought historically against. And I'm not sure why that has really caught fire in this moment. And I'd like to get back to some basics about conversations of, do you think it doesn't impact you? Are you immune to what might be the realities for many of our Black sisters? Are you immune to the realities of what's going to happen to immigrants in our community? Are you, not aware of the dismantling of education as we see it right now? So to me, it is taking a step back and really trying to understand more fully what is missing along this decision-making tree that gets us to this election outcome. And, it's probably not one singular thing. We'll have to unparse it along the way. But I know that myself and Kelly and many other white women are recognizing in this moment that it is our work to be done, to understand more fully, where the disconnect is between policies and candidates that people are endorsing, and the realities of how they operate everyday lives. And can we get back to some kitchen table conversations and really take some of these big statements that have just flooded our airwaves for months and months and months and take that down to, what does this mean for your neighbor down the street? What does this mean for raids that might happen in businesses and kids coming back from school and their parents not there? A separation from children with their families at the border. I mean, these are very real things. And as mothers and as women, we need to stand up and say, this is not right.
Yeah.
We need to be the conscious of this country. I'm sorry. Anyways, I'll stop there. That was more than a last.
No, that was great.
comment.
No, it
That was
good.
great.
And never feel like you have to stop. This conversation will continue. And I think I've shared before, like, I'm not sure what my capacity is right now, like just my heart and my head and my action. And I know, I'm like, there's tears here for real, Angie. I get that and I feel you. But I want all of us to know, like, we're here and we're listening. Shit.
Sorry, Kelly.
No, you're good. You're good. But if it ever feels like nobody's got you, remember that, we've got each other. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at Denise, I'm looking at Angie. I'm just, damn, I wasn't, yeah.
It's okay. It's all right. It's all right. It's a process. I mean, it's where we are. And so, there's some big, heavy issues and big things that are going to come our way, and I think as a Black woman, I'm like, okay, now, like you mentioned, I know we're supposed to be wrapping this up, but like,
No, you're
it's
good.
almost
You're
like
good.
there's just so much to unpack here. Like when you talked about immigration and, so you look at the Latin vote that occurred and the numbers, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Like,
Right.
did anyone read the immigration policy? Did anyone read
25?
Project 2025? Like, it's going to happen. Like, and these babies are going to be separated from. This is
The media.
It's coming. Yeah. It's coming. And so, are you happy now? You know, is this what you wanted? Is this what you wanted on your watch? You know, that's the part that scares me. You know, one of my sorority sisters said, you know, her daughter, who is, I think she's 11 right now, will have less rights than her grandmother. Like, what kind of the nation are we living in when a child who is 11 has less rights than her grandmother, who's probably in her 70s or 80s?
Right.
How does that happen? And why does that happen? And how do we as women allow that to happen? You know, that's the part that blows my mind about this.
Right. Lots to unpack there.
That is a lot.
Is.
Next conversations. I encourage everyone to think about, as Denise said, creating your own table, having those conversations, looking for ways to develop your community of care, take some action, but also protect your joy, and make sure that you're taking care of yourself and the people and the lives that you can touch right now. It is an unknown. We have to prepare for the unknown and really stay ready, and you know, try to stay grounded and focused and ready to take action where it matters most, and when we can be brought to that table to take action. And like I said, I'm sorry it didn't happen. I hate that it didn't happen when we needed it to happen, but here we are, and what can we do? So Denise, I look forward to continued conversations with the platform.
Yes.
Angie, you're always welcome to join us, but Denise is not going to get out of this one too easily. But you both have very important voices. I appreciate you sharing them
Kelly,
on this
thank
platform
you for the
today.
opportunity and for all you're doing, and I'm excited to see what's to come.
Me too. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for inviting us.
Oh my
Thank
God,
you.
Thank you. And thank you, badasses, for listening. Appreciate you. Appreciate where we are and where we need to go. And we'll see. We'll stay tuned.